Hello and welcome to the 114th episode of the Henry George Daily Devotional on our quest to get my friend John to become a Georgist. I don't know, people don't like to admit when they're beaten. Um, he's kind of a Georgist now, but he is definitely one who doesn't think it'll happen anytime soon. I guess. I don't know. He may not even confess to that much. All right. We're still in book 10, The Law of Human Progress. We are still in chapter 4. Uh, how civilization might decline, how modern civilization may decline. George writes, where there is anything like an equal distribution of wealth, that is to say, where there is general patriotism, virtue, and intelligence, the more democratic the government, the better it will be. But where there is gross inequality in the distribution of wealth, the more democratic the government, the worse it will be. For while rotten democracy may not in itself be worse than rotten autocracy, its effects upon national character will be worse. To give the suffrage to tramps, to paupers, to men to whom the chance to labor is a boon, to men who must beg or steal or starve, is to invoke destruction. To put political power in the hands of men embittered and degraded by poverty is to tie firebrands to foxes and turn them loose amid the standing corn. It is to put out the eyes of a Samson and to twine his arms around the pillars of national life. Yeah, this is a crazy paragraph, basically despairing of democracy in the face of wealth inequality. Again, I repeat that this was exactly the same year, or the next year is when Aristotle's Constitutions was first published, when modern society learned about sortition. Of course, I don't know much about the history of sortition. Um, I mean, direct democracy clearly was known, where everyone could vote upon a legislative act. However, it was also very much understood that as soon as you get a large society, that has a lot of drawbacks, issues, inefficiencies. Like if you fully believe in this, how could the USA be saved in a sense? And this is definitely where a lot of, from what I can tell, reading through Albert J. Nock's memoirs now, but having read Land and Liberty by Christopher England, who said that a number of early 20th century Georgists despaired of democracy. Uh, I was in a similar place. Even when I first learned of Georgism, I still am somewhat skeptical that it will be adopted, but not certain. Yeah. All right. George writes, even the accidents of hereditary succession or of selection by lot, the plan in some of the ancient republics. Wow, it's right there. Well, that's weird. I wonder if, hmm, may sometimes place the wise and just in power. I guess he's referring to just selecting a singular leader by lot. This was not something like a sortition body. But in a corrupt democracy, the tendency is always to give power to the worst. Honesty and patriotism are weighted, and unscrupulousness commands success. The best gravitate to the bottom, the worst float to the top, and the vile will only be ousted by the viler. While his national character must gradually assimilate to the qualities that win power and consequently respect, that demoralization of opinion goes on, which in the long panorama of history we may see over and over again transmuting races of free men into races of slaves. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this selection by lot here, especially when it's contrasting with hereditary succession, refers to only the selection of a head of state. Nothing like forming a legislative body by drawing of lots among a citizenry. This was probably a selection by lot of some pool of aristocrats or clergy, if I don't know. Anyway, I wonder. Yeah, I don't know how I could learn more about what he's talking. Yeah, he doesn't. He definitely doesn't. I mean, I've read this before. I haven't read this since I had studied sortition, and I'm definitely. George does not talk about this idea very much at all in Progress and Poverty in the remaining little bit we have left. And of course, he hasn't talked about it much here up to this point either. As in England in the last century, when Parliament was but a close corporation of the aristocracy, a corrupt oligarchy clearly fenced off from the masses may exist without much effect on national character, because in that case power is associated in the popular mind with other things than corruption. But where there are no hereditary distinctions and men are habitually seen to raise themselves by corrupt qualities from the lowest places to wealth and power, tolerance of these qualities finally becomes admiration. A corrupt democratic government must finally corrupt the people, and when a people become corrupt, there is no resurrection. The life is gone, only the carcass remains, and it is left but for the plowshares of fate to bury it out of sight. It's hard for me to, and I'm also like some sort of scared of openly saying that perhaps a lot of these modern freedoms have not been worth it. I think all of the modern freedoms would be blessings in the land value tax world. This is often what I run up against, and like if we can't have the land value tax, by which I mean if we cannot guarantee every human their share of the earth, what is the next best way? What are the best band-aids? And it is funny how I was thinking the other day, well, oh, you should just make sure like the richest people in each town should just be responsible for caring for all of the poor people in their town. And then I was like, oh, well, that's feudalism. That's the local lord. Anyway. Now, this transformation of popular government into despotism of the vilest and most degrading kind, which must inevitably result from the unequal distribution of wealth, is not a thing of the far future. It has already begun in the United States and is rapidly going on under our eyes. That our legislative bodies are steadily deteriorating in standard. That men of the highest ability and character are compelled to eschew politics, and the arts of the jobber count for more than the reputation of the statesman. I know he's talked about jobbers a lot, and oh man. the middle, but I think jobber definition historical. What did jobber mean in the late 1800s? Was it condescending? What's the word? Not derogatory. A derogatory term. A jobber might have been viewed as someone who engaged in opportunistic or unethical dealings, such as exploiting their position for personal gain through favoritism, bribery, or influence peddling. In this context, it could imply corruption or dishonesty. I think that is our context. That voting is done more recklessly and the power of money is increasing, that it is harder to arouse the people to the necessity of reforms and more difficult to carry them out, that political differences are ceasing to be differences of principle and abstract ideas are losing their power, that parties are passing into the control of what in general government would be oligarchies and dictatorships, are all evidences of political decline. The type of modern growth is the great city. Here are to be found the greatest wealth and the deepest poverty. And it is here that popular government has most clearly broken down. In all the great American cities, there is today as clearly defined a ruling class as in the most aristocratic countries of the world. I think the ruling classes have learned to hide themselves much, much more. If anything, that's the great difference. They dress down, they travel surreptitiously, or they even take their helicopters around. Its members carry wards in their pockets, make up the slates for nominating conventions, distribute offices as they bargain together, and though they toil not, neither do they spin. Wear the best of raiment and spend money lavishly. Though they toil not, neither do they spin. They are men of power whose favor the ambitious must court, and whose vengeance he must avoid. Who are these men? The wise, the good, the learned? Men who have earned the confidence of their fellow citizens by the purity of their lives, the splendor of their talents, their probity and public trust, their deep study of the problems of government? See, I knew that was going to be a question. No, they are gamblers, saloon keepers, pugilists, or worse, who have made a trade of controlling votes and of buying and selling offices and official acts. They stand to the government of these cities as the Praetorian Guards did to that of declining Rome. He who would wear the purple, fill the curule chair, chariot, pertaining to a chariot. Or have the fasces carried before him. Italian symbol. Must go or send his messengers to their camps, give them donatives. I guess that just means donation. I'm not looking that one up. And make them promises. It is through these men that the rich corporations and powerful pecuniary interests can pack the Senate and the bench with their creatures. It is these men who make school directors, supervisors, assessors, members of the legislature, congressmen. Why, there are many election districts in the United States in which a George Washington, a Benjamin Franklin, or a Thomas Jefferson could no more go to the lower house of a state legislature than under the ancient regime a base-born peasant could become a marshal of France. Their very character would be an insuperable disqualification. In theory, we are intense democrats. The proposal to sacrifice swine in the temple would hardly have excited greater horror and indignation in Jerusalem of old than would among us that of conferring a distinction of rank upon our most eminent citizen. Yeah. But is there not growing up among us a class who have all the power without any of the virtues of aristocracy? Yeah, there's a weird sense in which aristocracy is hard to overthrow when it was coupled with this noblesse oblige and this idea, like, that they were of higher blood and they were oftentimes honorable and generous. So it would be kind of hard to condemn that. And now it's a little hard to condemn just the wealthy because they seem to be just like us, like us. I don't know. We have simple citizens, and they can always play that card. I'm just a simple citizen. Mr. President. What a funny term. We have simple yeah, like we just call him the president. And, you can go be the president of whatever thing you want to be president of. I don't know. We have simple citizens who control thousands of miles of railroad, millions of acres of land, the means of livelihood of great numbers of men, who name the governors of sovereign states as they name their clerks, choose senators as they choose attorneys, and whose will is as supreme with legislatures as that of a French king sitting in bed of justice. It's also like sort of hidden from us how, we think of the United States as it is one country, but it is one country of many kingdoms. As I've become more active in local politics, I've begun to see there are sort of the kings and queens of Los Angeles or Orange County, even the local lords of Los Alamitos or Artesia, or Santa Ana. The undercurrents of the times seem to sweep us back again to the old conditions from which we dreamed we had escaped. The development of the artisan and commercial classes gradually broke down feudalism after it had become so complete that men thought heaven as organized on a feudal basis, and ranked the first and second persons of the Trinity as suzerain and tenant-in-chief. But now the development of manufactures and exchange acting in a social organization in which land is made private property and threatens to compel every worker to seek a master, as the insecurity which followed the final breakup of the Roman Empire compelled every freeman to seek a lord. Nothing seems exempt from this tendency. Industry everywhere tends to assume a form in which one is master and many serve. And when one is master and the others serve, the one will control the others, even in such matters as votes. Just as the English landlord votes his tenants, so does the New England mill owner vote his operatives. There is no mistaking it. The very foundations of society are being sapped before our eyes while we ask, okay, not finishing this, while we ask, how is it possible that such a civilization as this, with its railroads and daily newspapers and electric telegraphs, should ever be destroyed? And against this, all these comments, I say that we have yet progressed further. Is that simply the great momentum of the new world? Is that because George was wrong in his analysis? Is that sort of made more complicated by many of the sort of band-aids toward many of the band-aids to ameliorate the devastations of private property in land that have, elongated or propped up the American empire? You also have the world wars and many other wars that have mixed things up. While literature breathes but the belief that we have been, are, and for the future must be, leaving the savage state further and further behind us, there are indications that we are actually turning back again toward barbarism. Let me illustrate. One of the characteristics of barbarism is the low regard for the rights of person and property. That the laws of our Anglo-Saxon ancestors imposed as penalty for murder a fine proportion to the rank of the victim, while our law knows no distinction of rank and protects the lowest from the highest, the poorest from the rich, by the uniform penalty of death, is looked upon as evidence of their barbarism and our civilization. And so that piracy and robbery and slave trading and blackmailing were once regarded as legitimate occupations is conclusive proof of the rude state of development from which we have so far progressed. That's weird. I mean, slave trading and piracy, perhaps. Robbery and blackmailing, legitimate occupations, I don't know. But it is a matter of fact that in spite of our laws, anyone who has money enough and wants to kill another may go into any one of our great centers of population and business and gratify his desire and then surrender himself to justice, with the chances as 100 to 1 that he will suffer no greater penalty than a temporary imprisonment and the loss of a sum proportioned partly to his own wealth and partly to the wealth and standing of the man he kills. His money will be paid not to the family of the murdered man who have lost their protector, not to the state, which has lost a citizen, but to lawyers who understand how to secure delays, to find witnesses, and get juries to disagree. I wonder what events he's specifically has in mind. And so if a man steal enough, he may be sure that his punishment will practically amount but to the loss of a part of the proceeds of his theft. And if he steal enough to get off with a fortune, he will be greeted by his acquaintances as a Viking might have been greeted after a successful cruise. Even though he robbed those who trusted him, even though he robbed the widow and the fatherless, he is only to get enough, and he may safely flaunt his wealth in the eyes of day. I think so much of the theft that happens now, we don't even, we often don't even see it or hear about it. I mean, the big ones make it in the news occasionally. Someone goes to jail, but this makes me just think of the banks, the whole banking industry. They just simply have permission to print money, and then they get bailed out by the government, and it's absolutely absurd. All right. I hope everyone's nice and sad. See you next time.